Oh my goodness. The 2022 British Grand Prix literally had everything, for better and for worse, and is officially the craziest Formula One race I have ever seen, so I cannot wait to break it down for you right now. J-Bone! First and foremost, thank you to the Halo system for saving Zhou Guanyu's life. If you're not familiar, the Halo system is a crash protection device added to all F1 cars back in 2018, and it literally looks like a halo around the driver's head with a bar in front for support, and it is designed to protect drivers' exposed heads as they sit in their cockpits. It originally met a lot of opposition because it reduces driver visibility, and also because many people in the sport thought that F1 cockpits should be completely open to maintain the spirit of the sport, or something dumb like that. Everyone who was against the Halo has since eaten their words, as it's already saved multiple lives, including those of Romain Grosjean, Charles Leclerc, and 2 lives this weekend alone, Alfa Romeo's Zhou Guanyu and F2's Roy Nissany. My heart sunk when I saw Zhou's upside-down car skid into and out of frame on lap 1, and it sunk even lower when we were not given an update on Zhou's condition for what felt like an eternity. And after we found out he was okay, my heart raised back up a little bit, only to sink once again after seeing replays of his horror crash that is undeniably the worst crash in Formula One since Romain Grosjean's fireball crash back in 2020. If not for the Halo, this certainly would have been a fatal accident, so thank goodness for the safety strides that the FIA have made. Although, I should note that Alfa Romeo definitely need to reconsider their blade-style roll hoop, as it completely failed during this crash. The roll hoop is like a roll cage for single-seater cars, and was the only protection for drivers' heads before the Halo was introduced, making it even more of a certainty that this crash would have had a completely different and way worse outcome without the Halo. So thank you very much, Halo. We love you. I also want to say get well soon to Alex Albon, who, like Zhou, was also sent to receive medical assistance after a separate crash that occurred as a result of Zhou's crash. Unlike Zhou, however, Albon was actually flown to a hospital for some precautionary checks, but he's already checked out, he's doing great, and thankfully and amazingly, both Albon and Zhou should both be good to go for Austria this weekend. Next up, on my British Grand Prix preview podcast, I gave you 3 storylines to follow throughout the race weekend. Let's see how those shaped up. The first storyline was, will Max Verstappen get his Silverstone revenge by winning the 2022 British Grand Prix? And Max certainly did not get any sort of revenge at the British Grand Prix, as he ended up having to battle to get just P7 after running over some debris while leading the race that completely damaged the left-hand side of his floor and caused him to have to drive most of Sunday with significantly less downforce. All things considered, it's pretty remarkable that Max was able to still finish P7 given how much damage his car had suffered and how much downforce he lost. But at the end of the day, revenge sought, revenge not found. The second storyline was, how will Mercedes perform at the 2022 British Grand Prix? And the answer is kind of complex, because George Russell unfortunately did not make it to turn 1. He was involved in that Zhou Guanyu crash and then got out to help Zhou, which ended up ending his race, and I will talk more about that situation later on this episode. But Lewis Hamilton was absolutely flying out there at the British Grand Prix. He started the race off with an insane double overtake of Lando Norris and Checo Perez that would have been my choice for race start of the year so far, had the race not been red flagged before that position change had been classified, erasing it from ever happening, aside from in all of our memories. We'll always have the memories. Even then, If not for the late safety car caused by Esteban Ocon stopping on the track due to a fuel pump issue, Lewis Hamilton looked very on to win the British Grand Prix. He set a bunch of fastest laps in a row at one point and ended the race with his and Mercedes' first fastest lap award of the season, showing he clearly had the pace at Silverstone. But, unfortunately, that late safety car smooshed the pack together and gave Checo and Sainz the opportunity to put fresh sets of soft tires on their faster cars, which made them just too fast for Lewis to really compete with in the end, though we did at least get that all-time great lap 45 battle between Lewis, Leclerc, Checo, and then randomly Alonso and Norris too, that replays in my brain every 15 seconds because it was just so mesmerizing. At the end of the day, Mercedes should feel really good about the progress they've made and should also just be thankful that Ferrari didn't pit Leclerc as well as Sainz, because that almost certainly would have made it so Lewis didn't even finish on the podium, because either A, he then would have tried to stay out for track position and then lost to both Ferraris and Checo, or B, he would have still pit and then lost to both Ferraris and Checo. The third storyline was, can McLaren make a return to form at their home Grand Prix? And overall, they did not. Lando finished P6 from P6 on the starting grid, a fine result for McLaren, which would have been more celebrated had McLaren not unfortunately pitted Lando on lap 34 just before the late safety car. This safety car gave Fernando Alonso a cheap pit stop and put him back out on track ahead of Lando in P5, where Alonso would finish the race. Lando easily, and I mean really easily, would have finished at least P5 had McLaren been more lucky there. Even with this bad luck, Lando was still a little bit involved in that incredible lap 45 racing that was headlined by Lewis, Checo, and Leclerc, and had McLaren been more fortunate with the timing of their pit stop, there's a chance, it's a small chance, but still a chance, that Lando could have been even more involved in that battle for, a shot at maybe some chaos happening and him finishing even higher than P5. But alas, we will never know, because, the safety car giveth and the safety car taketh away. That's kind of the nice thing about the safety car. It's very equalizing, right? It's so random that it's just like the luck of the draw, which makes racing so exciting. Like, the fact that there could be a safety car at any time, like, even if a race is boring and there's, any more than, 7 laps left, chaos can occur. And I'm always here for chaos. Daniel Ricciardo, however, did not have as good of a race as Lando Norris, not even close, in fact. Danny Rick finished second to last of all race finishers in P13. In what was a mega disappointing weekend for him. So it's safe to say that McLaren have not returned to form, but are at the very least still getting top sixes, which is definitely something. Real quick, before we keep going, if you're enjoying the Formula Bone F1 show and want to help me grow the show as well as be notified whenever I release new Formula One content, I would really, really appreciate it if you could take 10 seconds right now and subscribe to my YouTube channel, then ring that notification bell to turn on all Formula Bone notifications. The YouTube algorithm has been liking my video episodes lately thanks to all of you, and I'm really, really trying to keep that ball rolling with this episode so I can continue to grow my audience and make even more F1 content for you all. Also, I'm trying to get 1,000 likes on this video episode if you're able to help me out with that as well. Thank you all so much for the support. It means the world to me. J-Bone! All right. Now here are some additional storylines that came up throughout the race weekend that have not been covered yet and will not be covered later in the episode. So we got a lot to cover today. This race was insane. First up, what an amazing recovery drive Checo Perez had at the British Grand Prix. From P4 on the starting grid to last place after suffering first lap wing damage, and all the way back up to an incredible P2 after a very fortunate late race safety car. Checo is, of course, no stranger to incredible recovery drives, having driven one of the greatest drives of all time, from last place to a race win at the 2020 Sakir Grand Prix, and Checo proved that he's still got it with this amazing performance. Vamos, Checo! Next up, somebody call the doctor because my Haas delusion syndrome is absolutely out of control right now after Mick Schumacher finished in the points for the first time ever, and Haas got a double points finish for the first time in around 3 years. Now, what I'm about to say is not a result of my Haas delusion syndrome, I promise, okay? But isn't it crazy to think that Haas are about to go 1-2 at every Grand Prix for the rest of the season and win the Constructors with K-Mag and Mick both finishing the season as co-world champions? No Haas delusion syndrome, just vibes. And finally, a round of applause for Nicholas the GOAT Latifi. At the British Grand Prix, Latifi made it to his first ever Q3 in qualifying, then drove hard on Sunday, getting as high as P8 during the Grand Prix, and while he did not end up finishing in the points with his P12, he did achieve something arguably even better. He has officially jumped ahead of Aston Martin reserve driver Nico Hülkenberg in the 2022 World Drivers' Championship standings and is now sitting firmly in 20th place instead of 21st place among the 20 full-time driver field. Goats do goat things. Bah. Of course, I need to now check in with you all regarding how my 3 bona fide race predictions fared at the 2022 British Grand Prix. My first race prediction was that Charles Leclerc would win the British Grand Prix from pole position, and I actually got this one right because I totally meant to say that Carlos Sainz would win the British Grand Prix from pole position. I just misspoke. I meant to say Carlos Sainz. So I'm just going to count it. Ding, ding. J-Bone got that one right. J-Bone! Massive congratulations are in order for Carlos Sainz for achieving his first Formula One win in his 150th F1 race. After a surprise pole position had Carlos start the race in P1, and then a very fortunate for Carlos technicality had him restart the race in P1 after the red flag, even after Max had already annihilated him at the original race start. Carlos was able to stay in the fight long enough to be the main benefactor of the late race safety car and the questionable at best Ferrari strategy decisions that went with it. Speaking of which, my second race prediction was that Ferrari would occupy 2 spots on the podium at the British Grand Prix. Kind of got screwed out of this one, huh? Ferrari probably should have secured a 1-2 finish at the British Grand Prix, but they didn't even finish with 2 drivers on the podium because of some peculiar and many would say blunderous Ferrari strategy decisions. The main 2 questionable decisions people are pointing to are Ferrari not pitting Charles Leclerc for soft tires under the late race safety car, and Ferrari waiting too long to let Leclerc pass Sainz on track when Leclerc was looking as if he'd be faster than Sainz, even with the front wing damage that Leclerc had suffered. Ferrari have defended not pitting Leclerc for softs under the late safety car by saying that the 2 Ferrari cars were too close together to execute a double stack pit stop without Sainz having to wait behind Leclerc and thus potentially lose track position to Lewis Hamilton, though looking back at the timing data, it does look like there should have been enough time for both of them to pit and still come out ahead of Hamilton had Hamilton pitted as well. You could also make the argument here that if Ferrari had let Leclerc pass Sainz sooner, then there would have been time for a double stack so long as Leclerc wasn't so far ahead of Sainz that he'd passed the pit lane entry before the safety car was announced. After deciding there was not enough time for a double stack, Ferrari then decided to ruin their championship contenders race by splitting strategies, but in favor of Sainz, not Leclerc, having Leclerc stay out on his hards and Sainz close off Lewis by coming in for softs, a baffling decision that all but sealed Leclerc's no podium fate and killed Ferrari's double podium chances. I just do not understand why Ferrari thought it made any sense at all to leave one of their drivers out on the hard tires for track position at this stage, when the softs were so obviously going to annihilate that track position anyways. And I really do not understand why they chose Leclerc over Sainz to be the chump here, especially in a race where, at the time, Leclerc was looking like he could have erased up to 22 World Drivers' Championship points of Max's lead over him, while also jumping back into solo second place in the World Drivers' Championship. I saw a tweet that is perfect to read right now because it's just so fitting. It reads, "The championship fight is actually Charles Leclerc versus Ferrari." Mamma mia. If you have any takes on Ferrari's strategy decisions in the 2022 British Grand Prix, let me know in the YouTube comment section of this episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts. My third and final race prediction was that this would be the race where George Russell's top 5 hot streak came to an end. And listen up. I did correctly predict that George Russell's top 5 hot streak would end at the British Grand Prix, but I'm not happy about it, especially considering how it happened. So you're not going to hear a ding ding, J-Bone. Like I'm not going to do that here. A lot of people have been messaging me saying that I jinxed George, to which I will say it is pretty uncanny that the first time all season that I predict George's streak to end, it does. Not saying I'm psychic, just saying there could be something there. Where there's smoke, there's fire. But I should note that I did predict George's streak would stay alive in Canada, and it did. So you could argue it would have ended earlier anyways had I not done that. So, just some food for thought. Going unofficially 2 for 3 on my bona fide predictions isn't too bad, but I can feel it in my J-bones that the Austrian Grand Prix is where I will finally go 3 for 3 on my bona fide race predictions, so I cannot wait to give you those predictions. J-Bone! This episode of the Formula Bone F1 show is brought to you by Felix Gray Glasses. I'm literally wearing them on my face right now, and I can't wait to tell you about them. The good folks at Felix Gray create effective, research-backed products to improve humans' relationships with technology. It all started 5 years ago when Felix Gray set out to create eyewear that would make it easier and more comfortable for humans to stare at screens. Why? Because whether you like it or not, we all live in a digital world now, and that means we are forced to look at screens, and more screens all day, every day. I got like 7 screens looking at me right now. And the thing about all these screens is that they are wreaking havoc on our eyeballs and brains and causing things like eye strain, headaches, and blurry vision. The blue light emitted from these screens is the culprit, and Felix Gray's clear blue light lenses filter 15 times more blue light than other clear lenses. 9 out of 10 customers experience relief from eye strain, headaches, and or blurry vision, and Felix Gray Glasses don't just do a great job protecting your eyes and brain from the evil of screens, they're also incredibly high quality and built to last. If you're wondering, I'm currently wearing the Kepler frame with the clear blue light lens. Felix Gray also has sunglasses and amber blue light glasses that I also love, and you will too. Felix Gray has both non-prescription and prescription glasses available, so something for everyone. Check out their full selection at felixgrayglasses.com/fbone, where you'll have access to free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges for a completely risk-free shopping experience. Try them out, and if you do not like them for some reason, and I think you will, just help yourself to free shipping, returns, and exchanges. Risk-free, baby. That's FELIXGRAY glasses.com/FBONE. There's a link for that deal in the description of this episode. Thank you to Felix Gray Glasses for supporting the Formula Bone F1 show. Next up, it's time to respond to some British Grand Prix themed voicemails left by Formula Bone F1 show listeners on the Bone phone. If you're new to the Formula Bone F1 show, welcome. Happy you're here. After every race this season, I do one of these race recap episodes, and a large part of them is me responding to questions, comments, hot takes, and more left by Formula Bone F1 show listeners on the Bone phone, the phone number for which is 1-833-200-0966. And if you live somewhere where it's difficult to make phone calls, I've also created a channel in the Formula Bone Discord server where you can submit voice memos directly from your phone rather than having to call the hotline number. Check it out via the Discord invite link in the description of this episode. Also, just join the Formula Bone Discord anyways, because it's fun. There's an invite link in the description of this episode. So during or after each race, whenever you have an interesting thought, hot take, complaint, or anything else like that, make sure to hit up the Bone Phone or the Formula Bone Discord for a chance at your voicemail being played on the podcast. Without further ado, here's the first call.
J-Bone, Charlie in Dallas here. I'm admittedly a huge Carlos fan, so maybe I'm a little bit biased here. I really don't think it was fair of Mattia to ask him to sit back and defend when he was faster than Leclerc. And I don't think Charles had any chance of winning that race. Where do you stand on it? What do you think? Thanks. Have a good one.
I agree with you that after Ferrari decided to keep Leclerc out on his hards and to pit signs for softs, they should have shifted all strategy at that time to be supporting a Carlos Sainz win, because Leclerc had absolutely no chance of defending against not only Carlos, but Hamilton and Checo as well. If Carlos had listened to Ferrari and not aggressively tried to pass Charles Leclerc at the restart, Checo very well could have stolen this race from Ferrari. So good on Carlos for realizing that and overriding his team's decision. Ferrari should honestly just consider making Carlos Sainz their lead strategist at this point, because their current one clearly stinks, and Carlos has now made better calls than Ferrari have in both Monaco and Great Britain. Just something to consider, Ferrari. Next call.
What's going on? This is Rich from Philly. Regarding the George Russell getting out of his car and not being able to restart the race, everyone's talking about the rule saying that the car can't come back to the pit under, not under its own power to restart the race, and that's all well and good. But what I haven't heard anyone talking about is the fact that once he got back into the car, if he got back into the car and drove it back to the pit, he would have been able to buckle up his safety harness, because there's just not enough room to really do that. So he would have had to drive the car around the track not strapped in, which, as far as I'm aware, is a violation of the rules, and he would have been penalized. So we'll love to hear your thoughts on that. Thanks.
This is an interesting point. So I looked up the rule regarding wearing safety gear during a race and found Article 26.9 of the sporting regulations, which states, quote, "Drivers taking part in any practice session, sprint session, or the race must always wear the clothes, helmets, and head and neck supports specified in the code." The way I read this, George could have made the argument that he wasn't taking part in the race when he stopped to help out Joe because there was a red flag and thus no racing going on. And so if he'd been able to get back in his car and reattach all his head and neck supports, which I think he may have been able to do by himself, then he could have continued on. However, Article 37.6b of the sporting regulations states that, quote, "all cars abandoned on the track will be removed to a safe place." So the marshals moved George Russell's car after he abandoned it to help Joe, and then once it had been moved, it was ineligible to re-enter the race according to Article 26.4 of the sporting regulations, which states that, quote, "if any mechanical assistance received during a sprint session or the race results in the car rejoining, the stewards may disqualify him from that sprint session or the race." Now, it's interesting to note that it says the stewards may disqualify him. So I think they could have actually overridden this rule and used their discretion to say, oh, George was being a good Samaritan, let's let him continue on, rather than just saying, nope, you're out of the race, buddy. Good job being nice. Have fun not racing. Really rude of them, by the way. So, in the end, George kind of sealed his own fate by abandoning his car, even though he was being a good Samaritan in doing so. I think the FIA should consider changing the rules to make an exemption for drivers who abandon their cars under red flag conditions to administer aid, so that no drivers in the future get so harshly penalized for doing the right thing. Next call.
J-Bone!
J-Bone! Next call.
Hey, I'm Colton from Georgia. For Lewis's first pit stop, after he did 30
laps on the mediums, why did he go to hards instead of just going to either softs or mediums to finish the race? Thanks.
Lewis only had 19 laps left in the race after he pitted on lap 33, which makes the hard to warm up hard tires a peculiar choice at first glance. But they make more sense when you consider the rule that drivers must use 2 different tire compounds during a race, so the medium tires were not available to Lewis as he started on them, making the choice come down to hards or softs. And 19 push laps on the softs while trying to pass 2 Ferraris would have been a bit of a gamble because the softs degrade quickly. Plus, Lewis was already gaining on the Ferraris on equal compounds on the mediums, so matching the Ferraris on hards made the most sense, and I believe actually would have won Lewis the race had, number one, Mercedes not put them on by way of a bad 4.3 second pit stop, and number two, there not have been that late safety car that screwed Lewis over. That's it for today's episode of the Formula Bone F1 show. If you enjoyed the show, folks, and you want to help me out, I would really appreciate it if you could toss me a comment, like, subscription, rating, review, or any other form of engagement on whatever platform you're on right now, so that said platform and its algorithm, like J-Bone more. I respond to pretty much every single YouTube comment on my episodes, and if you don't believe me, try it out. Speaking of YouTube, if you join the Noti Gang by ringing that bell and turning on all Formula Bone YouTube notifications, I will love you forever. For Formula One updates between now and my Austrian Grand Prix preview podcast later this week, you can join the Formula Bone Discord server via the invite link in the description of this episode. You can also follow me on all social media at Formula Bone and at my real name, Jared Borislow. That's at JaredBorislow. Until next time, J-Bone!